Alaikum rahmatullah. Don't you just hate it? Every time you switch on the TV, scroll through Facebook, or read a newspaper, it's Muslims have done this and Muslims have done that. They're barbaric, this religion is dangerous, etc., etc., etc. The saddest thing is that so many people out there believe it. It's people like you and I who need to dismantle these misconceptions by showing how beautiful Islam is. If it wasn't for such amazing dawah organizations out there, many people wouldn't be Muslim today. One such amazing organization is the Islamic Diversity Center. For over 17 years now, they've been building bridges within communities and calling people towards Islam through education, awareness, engagement, and empowerment. Their amazing work has resulted in hundreds of people accepting Islam and thousands more understanding that Islam is not about killing and murder. Rather, it is a peaceful religion full of understanding, harmony, and worship. In order to continue guiding the masses, they urgently need to raise £50,000. That's just 500 people donating £100 each. Now, as Muslims, if we can't sacrifice our time and resources to call people to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, then at least we should sacrifice a tiny percentage of our wealth, which Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has blessed us with. Please donate £100 today and earn Sadaqah Jariyah on your scale of good deeds from now until the end of the Day of Judgment, where your only hope of entering Jannah is through the mercy of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Please, lastly, hit the share button. Wajazakumullahu khair.
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Welcome to Newcastle Fast FM. This is the second show for Sisters Speak, and today's topic, inshallah, is peer pressure. You're joined today by myself, Ruweyda, and my fellow sisters. Guys, can you introduce yourselves?
Assalamu alaikum. My name is Ikram.
Assalamu alaikum. My name is Ruqayyah.
Okay, cool. So as I mentioned, today's show, inshallah, is about peer pressure. So we're going to kick the conversation off and ask, first of all, what is peer pressure? Guys, Ikram?
Okay, so peer pressure is just when you are influenced by other members in your group or people who are surrounding you.
Yeah, exactly. And yeah, it's when you're influenced by other people around you. And what do we think? Is peer pressure always a bad thing, or can it sometimes be a good thing? Ruqayyah, what's your opinion on this?
I don't think peer pressure is always bad. I think a lot of people mostly talk about the bad because obviously the consequences are bigger, but there is always a positive and negative side of things, and there can be positive peer pressure, I think. Do you want me to give any examples?
Yeah, why not?
So like a good thing about it can be like you can encourage someone to behave better and try to achieve more and accomplish more than they might have thought. So it's like a bit of a confidence boost. You can kind of give someone like a sense of belonging and support, like a support system given by the right friends. You can like learn new things. You're like introduced to positive interests and positive habits and stuff like that. And yeah, like I said, you can always like get a kind of sense of increased self-confidence. Those are the four that I think are important, and the positives of peer pressure.
Yeah, definitely. Have any of you ever been peer pressured in a good way? Can you give like a personal example? Ikram, maybe?
Well, I actually hold the opposite view, because I personally wouldn't call, if I was going to be pressured to do something good, I wouldn't call that peer pressure. Because I feel like when you're talking about peer pressure, it always tends to have negative connotations due to that word pressure. Because if you're pressured into doing something, it's almost as if you're being forced or coerced, or you feel like you have to do something, not because you necessarily want to do something. And that's why I feel like peer pressure is negative. If you're made to do something good or influenced into something good, that's positive influence. That's something completely different from peer pressure. So I have been influenced into doing good things. Like a really little example is like, for example, like when I go out to eat with my friends, if I start to clean up our table a bit, or they clean up their table, then I'll do it. Or if I start, they'll do it. So that's positive influenced. But I'm the opposite view. I do think that, like I said, peer pressure is bad because it is wrong because it's a form of oppression to me, or unwanted power that's being exerted over individuals. And the Quran does say in Surah 42, Ashura, Ayah 42, that the blame is only against those who oppress mankind. For such there is a painful doom. And Abu Abdullah Imam Sadiq salam has been reported to say, whoever does injustice, God will make someone dominant on him who will do injustice to him, to his children, and to his grandchildren. So that is my opinion, that I do think peer pressure does tend to always be bad.
Okay, I actually agree with Ruqayyah in this case. I do think that sometimes peer pressure can be a good thing. Maybe the word to use isn't peer pressure. Maybe it is, as you said, Ikram. I forgot what you mentioned. The term that you
influence.
yeah, positive influence. Yeah, maybe that's the correct term. But yeah, I definitely think that sometimes, like, if I'm around my Muslim friends, for example, and it's Salah time, and I'm at uni, for example, sometimes they'd be like, oh, let's go pray. So that's kind of a positive peer pressure, or they remind me to pray. So yeah, and there is a comment here by Salwa Abdul Razak that says peer pressure are the influences around our peers in society. So to avoid this, we need to let go of the wrong pressures and gravitate to good Muslims who are sincere and take Quran as our friends. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala tells us in all aspects of life how to live, all written in the Quran. We believe in the unseen and our reward is after this life, simply a test. So yeah, definitely I agree with that. It is the influences around us, and we can avoid it. And we'll talk a little bit more about that later on in the show. So yeah, and a lot of the times we experience peer pressure when our moral values and another person's moral values kind of collide and they don't agree with each other. So because of this is what causes peer pressure. So yeah. So let's move into why do young people fall into peer pressure? Ruqayyah.
Why do people fall into it? I'd say like kind of like a fear of being rejected by people that you might want to like get close to. I think this is like the negative kind of peer pressure. Kind of like trying to be socially accepted by a specific like friendship group. Yeah, like you're trying to fit in and do the things that they would do to make yourself maybe a kind of like appear more cool in their eyes, or kind of like out of fear of maybe that the consequences of what would happen if you didn't do what you were kind of peer pressured into doing. So a kind of like avoidance of bullying kind of thing. Yeah.
Yeah, I agree with you, Ruqayyah, that I think a lot of young people do fall into peer pressure because they want to fit in, and majority of the time it's because they don't want to be the target, because they know that if they don't join in and like make someone else a target, like they're gonna be, the distraction is on them, if that makes sense. So they don't want to be the one who's getting picked on. And I also think as well, like there's a psychology to it as well. Like when you're in a larger group, you become less fearful of the consequences because it's harder for you as an individual to be like singled out from someone. So I feel like people get peer pressured because they tend to also be in larger groups. They feel invincible and they end up doing things that they wouldn't normally do if they were alone. That's what I think.
Yeah, definitely. It is to do with being in that group and wanting to be liked and popular and, you know, a part of that group, wanting to fit in. So a lot of the time it is, I would say it stems from this kind of insecurity that people have, where they believe that if they don't agree with what their friends say or what their friends are doing, um, they're going to be like cast out of the group, and they kind of fear that. So yeah, that's what I would say. That's why a lot of young people fall into it, and especially in the UK, where a lot of sometimes our friends are not people who share the same moral values as us. So, and in the Western world as a whole, actually, they don't share the same values as us. Therefore, um, sometimes our values collide. So, and you know, we disagree with um, what our thingy. We've got a comment here from Malahat that says, "So, girls, what is peer pressure for you?" So let's talk about our personal experiences with peer pressure. We'll focus on the negative because that's the one we want to avoid. That's the important one. So have you guys had any peer pressure in your experiences?
I think for me, when I was younger and easily influenced, because I'm quite stubborn now, so people can't really tell me, can't really influence me. But I think when I was younger at my age, it was dressing in a certain way. Like you'd want to, I feel like, especially with girls, like you really look at what you wear. And I was always surrounded by girls because I went to a girls' school. So I was pressured to like sort of dress in that type of way, in the way that they were dressing, because I felt like I would be accepted if I dressed like them. Um, Smoking, I think, as well, and also talking to boys in a non-professional setting. I think that was what was surrounding me when I was a bit younger.
Yeah, definitely. That sounds like a struggle that most young people would have to face. What about you, Ruqayyah? What kind of personal experiences have you had with peer pressure?
I wouldn't say I have any like personal experiences with peer pressure. Alhamdulillah, like I don't think I've ever been peer pressured into doing something that I know I shouldn't have. But obviously, I know the same cannot be said for most people. But I do know, not necessarily personal, but I have seen like, for example, when I used to get like the bus home from school, and like at the back of the bus on the double decker, there's always like kids making so much noise. And but I know for a fine fact that like if they were like on the bus individually, like I've seen them not make as much noise. So like I can see kind of like the influence of being in a friendship you can have when like when you see one of your friends do something that makes you want to do it, whereas like it might not be something that you would do if you were alone, if that makes sense. So like I've seen like kind of examples of that where um people don't act the way they would if they were alone, which of course I would class that as negative peer pressure. But as for like personal, I wouldn't say I've had any personal experiences as such. Alhamdulillah.
Okay, alhamdulillah, that's good. I'm similar to you, Ruqayyah. I haven't really experienced much, mainly because I think I surround myself by people who kind of have the same kind of moral values as I do. So, a lot of the time, I don't get that kind of influence from other people. But I do remember in my first year of university, I was partnered up with someone for some lab experiments, and I was like talking to him regularly because we had to do our work. And he did actually invite me to his birthday party. And I knew that this birthday party was going to have the alcohol, the drinks, the party, like the music, all of that kind of stuff. So, you know, I just politely declined, but it is something that I have definitely experienced. I wouldn't say like he was too like adamant on me to actually join, but you know, when you set your boundaries and you are respectful to the person, then inshallah they should be respectful back to you. And you shouldn't like overreact when someone's peer pressuring you into doing something. I think it's just better to just keep it simple. But yeah, let's have a look through the comments and mention them. So Gem T has mentioned following your desires and ignoring the guidance at the moment of a test. That's the issue. The more you give in, the harder it gets to back out. And yeah, that's true. So it's always good to like look at make sure you're not following your desires and kind of stay strong and have like the tawakkul, have the belief that Allah is always watching you and always listening to everything. So yeah, so how would you guys suggest people overcome issues with peer pressure?
Well, before I say my issue, I do like Salwa's comment. She says she posted 2 comments. The first one that she said is that it starts with ourselves. Take yourself as your best friend, look after yourself, and then take Quran as your message from the one who knows, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And if you do, you'll be guided because you chose this path. So be good to yourself and be good to your friends. May we gravitate to Allah. And then she also does say that He already tells us of the wiswas or whispers of the jinn and man, so understand right from wrong. It's all laid out in the Quran, and be strong, have faith and educate yourself, keeping to the reminders of the Quran and Sunnah of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, so that we do not go astray. And I do agree with that. I think the best way to overcome it is to remember what Allah has said and remember what has been said to us in the Quran, and how ultimately these people that we are probably surrounded around are not the ones who we should be scared of judging us or being isolated from, because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is the Almighty and the ultimate judge, and at the end of the day we will have to answer to Him on Yawm al-Qiyamah, and we won't be able to hide behind our friends or people that we hung out with in the dunya. And it does say that in Surah Takathur, ayah 8, that on that day you'll be asked about the pleasures you indulged in. So ultimately we are going to be questioned about it. So it's just about the remembering that Allah is watching us, and would we have an answer for our behavior at that time on Yawm al-Qiyamah?
Yeah, definitely. That's something I agree with. It is about knowing, realizing that there is a second life, and that we will be questioned about the things that we've done in this life. And I think we can get some really good guidance from the Quran regarding peer pressure. Allah mentions in the Quran, وَذَرْنِ الْمُكَذِّبِينَ أُولِي النَّعْمَةِ, and be patient over what they say and avoid them with gracious avoidance. And this is Allah talking to the Prophet about the disbelievers. And Allah knows that there is that, that the disbelievers are treating the Prophet in a specific way. And He knows that the best way for us to kind of relieve ourselves from that pressure is to avoid them, and He mentions with gracious avoidance. So yeah, and just like with the people of the cave in Surah Al-Kahf, they also were living in a corrupt society, and they stuck together and turned away from those people and went in isolation. Now, I wouldn't say like go and isolate yourself if you're experiencing peer pressure, but what I would say is try and get yourself out of the situation. What about you, Ruqayyah? What's your opinion on this?
Yeah, I think like when it comes to like peer pressure, it's just important to kind of like remember like what you kind of stand for, because one of the things also is that when you surround yourself with people who don't agree with what you stand for and what you believe in, then like it kind of becomes a reflection of you. Like you end up doing things that you don't want to do, and you kind of end up betraying what you might have been, what you kind of like raised with. So it's like one of the things, or like one of the like famous things when it comes to like good companies, like you are who you hang around with. So you don't want to associate yourself with like any negative people, because you become one, if that makes sense. And I also found like a hadith that says a person is likely to follow the faith of his friend. So look carefully whom you choose to befriend. So it's like when you surround yourself with people who peer pressure into doing things that you're uncomfortable with, you might end up like betraying your faith. And you don't want to go down that route, if that makes sense. Like you don't want to end up doing anything that you'll end up regretting, or you'll end up having to be asked about on Judgment Day, and you don't have like a good reason for, and when you can do better, if that makes sense.
Yeah, definitely. I do agree with Ruqayyah. And someone in the comments did a post, Surah Al-An'am, ayah 116, which says that if you obey most of those upon the earth, like they will lead you astray from the way of Allah, as they follow nothing but a sunrise, merely conjecturing. So it just reiterates what Ruqayyah and what some of the sisters are saying in the comments, such as Salwa and I think it was Sabrina as well, that you should just follow the Quran and remember that Allah is always watching.
Definitely.
Yeah, exactly.
So it's all about surrounding yourself with good people, and realizing that this is a temporary life, and surrounding ourselves with who you want to be, as Fatima Adam mentioned in the comments. So yeah, and as Ibtisam has mentioned as well, people need to learn to be proud to be Muslims. The wish should be answered correctly and not imposed on everyone forcefully. And yeah, I agree. It's all about having confidence and being able to kind of stand up for yourself and stick to the kind of beliefs and the morals that we hold as Muslims. So yeah, moving on though, sometimes peer pressure, as we've already mentioned, is due to the friends and the company that we keep. And do you guys think it's necessary to cut off a relationship with someone who's constantly trying to get you to do things you don't want to do, and why? So Ikram?
Yes, in my opinion, I think it's very necessary to cut off relationships with people, because, like, for example, if someone had this is like a novel example, if someone had a rain cloud over them, like it didn't matter, it doesn't matter what you do, eventually the longer you stayed with them, the more chance the rain cloud is going to affect you, and you'll eventually get wet. And Gem T has just commented that bad company may have good company rub off on them, but good company also has bad company rub off on them. And that's really, really accurate. The more you stay with people who make you compromise, the more you'll start compromising on everything. And then eventually the minimum that you were doing, you'll compromise on it. So what you expose yourself to will eventually start resting in you, and it'll start manifesting in your actions. So when you're not even with that group, you'll start acting like them. So eventually what your group does you'll find it normal. You'll start to find it appealing because you exposed yourself to it so much. And it does say in Surah Kahf, ayah 18, where Allah tells us to keep ourselves with those who pray and seek Allah's countenance and forgiveness, etc., showing the importance of friends is paramount, that Allah is even stressing that you should keep yourself with those who are good and who remind you of Him, as that's who you'll be associated with. And we all know that on Yawm al-Qiyamah, when we are raised up to be judged, we're going to be raised up with the groups that we identified with the groups that we spent the most time with. You have to really think, would you want to be raised up with these people on Yawm al-Qiyamah, the day that you're going to be judged? Do you want to be judged with that same group of people? And if the answer is no, then subhanAllah, you just dissociate yourself from them. Because it also say that in Surah Az-Zakhruf, ayah 67, close friends that day will be enemies to each other, except for those who kept their duty to Allah. People who are close friends will be enemies, because instead of reminding each other of Allah or the hereafter and supporting each other, they were doing the opposite, which further shows the importance of people and the company you keep. You want friends that will remind you of Allah, and on Yawm al-Qiyamah not come back to spite you and to take away your good deeds or add to your bad deeds on the Day of Judgment. Because people who keep friends who do this to them, on the Day of Judgment they will say, oh, woe to me, I wish I had not taken that one as a friend. So I know it's really hard to think about the future and the Day of Judgment and how your actions are going to be judged, or how you would want your actions to be judged, because we can't like see it. This isn't something that we can envision. But we have to remember, like, this is not our last destination. This is not our ultimate goal. Our ultimate goal is Jannah, inshallah. And it's very important to have good friends, because Allah even says that after Day of Judgment has passed, when all the believers are in Jannah, the believers will intercede for their friends in hell. They will go to Allah and they'll say, oh, our Lord, our brothers who used to pray with us and fast with us and do good deeds with us, where are they? And Allah will say, go to hell, go to Jahannam, and whoever you find with a dinar weight of faith in his heart, bring him forth, and Allah will forbid their bodies to the fire, which shows you the importance of friends and good friends. So in my opinion, it is really necessary to cut off friends who lead you to do bad, because this just shows how important it is to surround yourself with good people who remind you of Allah in this world, and inshallah in the hereafter, if anything bad happens, they'll also remind Allah of you, that you used to pray with them, you used to fast with them, etc., etc.
Yeah, definitely. And we've got a lot of comments about this situation that we've just talked about. So from Salwa Abdul Razak, she says that man is created weak, so not to fall into temptation, we need to remove ourselves from wrong places and people. I'd much rather be alone, connected with Allah, than be with a crowd of wrong people. It is the heart that has the company of Allah, and it is a warm, happy feeling. And that's definitely true. I'd rather be alone as well, rather than connected with the wrong people. But as Malahat mentioned, it's important not to forget about others who need guidance through us. By surrounding ourselves only by Muslims, we miss the chance to help others to find a way. I think there's some truth to that, but if we're talking about the scenario that I mentioned, where this person is constantly trying to peer pressure you into doing something that you're not happy about, and that goes against your values as a Muslim, is this person, I don't know, is this person someone you should still stick by? I don't know. Ruqayyah, what's your opinion on this?
Do you mean on the quote or just in general?
Just in general, like, should we stay away from people who are a negative influence, who are constantly trying to get us to do things that go against our Islamic values?
Yeah, I do think it's necessary, and I agree with everything that Ikram said, mashallah. Like, all the points you made were literally so accurate. I just think that, like, any friend that's trying to encourage you to do anything that you're not comfortable with, regardless of like how serious and how like the severity of the action, is not someone that you keep around. Whether it's like the person that you hang around with is telling you to like take a pen from the teacher without asking, or like asking you to steal from a shop, you know, like regardless of how, you know, how different they are, like regardless of the severity of the action, you don't keep them around. And it's just necessary to keep good company, just to ensure that you don't do anything that would displease Allah and like compromise your religion. Like, good company equals happiness. The people that you're around kind of would determine how happy you are. Like, important that friends encourage goodness and motivate you to stay close or become close to Allah. Like, I found a little hadith that said, like, the question was, who is the best person to befriend? And the answer was, he who helps you remember Allah and reminds you when you forget him. So it's just like, when you remember things like that, and obviously that's not to say that it's not hard to kind of cut people out from your life. You know, this person that is peer pressuring you might be a friend that you've had for a really long time, and they've only recently changed into becoming this kind of person that is trying to get you to do things that you don't agree with. So no one's saying that it's necessarily easy to do, to kind of cut them out of your life and sever like all ties and stuff. But that being said, you just kind of need to keep your faith in Allah, and the people that you hang around with represent you. So if you want to like kind of be happy and stay close to Allah, then you need to just not kind of have any ties with anyone that isn't doing anything that you're comfortable with.
Exactly. And we're not saying, by the way, that you can't be friends with non-Muslims. I have plenty of
Oh yeah,
non-Muslim, but
me
they're
too.
not people who would peer pressure me into doing something which I don't want to do. They respect my values as a Muslim, and they know that not to ask me to go out for drinks with them, for example, or not to ask me to smoke, because they know what my values are and they respect that. And I think that's actually something really important as well, that once you're clear about your boundaries as a Muslim, like what you will do and what you won't do, if your friends or people who are constantly pressuring you into doing things that you've already told them, this is something I'm not comfortable with, I can't do this, then are they the right people to have around? I don't think so.
I do
So
agree. I do agree with Ruweyda. I understand where people in the comments may be coming from. You can have a variety of friends. No one is saying that you can't be friends with who you choose. We're just saying be wary of the people you choose to be friends with, because you can have many wonderful non-Muslim friends who, as Ruweyda says, respect your boundaries. And when you said no the first time, they don't keep pushing. They respect the fact that you said no and they back off. And then you can have people in quotation marks who are friends that when you said no, they keep saying, but why? But how about? Are you sure? Or are you? That's what we're saying. You can be friends with good people who respect you compared to friends who don't respect you. And friends like that can be Muslim or non-Muslim. People who don't respect your boundaries of what you said or your identity as a Muslim are the ones that you should avoid, because those are the ones who are exerting peer pressure, not the ones who back off when you've already given them your answer.
yeah, exactly. And I agree with that as well. I have a comment here from Asha Muhammad as well that says, Assalamu alaikum. I know because of living in the UK, in my school, there are no Muslims. For many people, going to school with no friends or people to help you through difficult times can be hard. And yeah, that's true. School can be really difficult. Even if you have friends, it can be a really difficult time. But as we're saying, it's not about just having Muslim friends. It's about having friends who don't pressure you into doing things that go against your moral values. So yeah, and as sorry.
No, you carry on.
I was just going to mention the hadith about the blacksmith and the thingy. I think Chicken Oriental mentioned it as well. It's the example of a good companion who sits with you in comparison with a bad one is like that of the musk seller and the blacksmith. Um, from the first, you would either buy musk or enjoy its good smell, while the bellows would either burn your clothes or your house, or you get a really bad smell from it. So yeah, definitely a relevant hadith to this context. But Ikram, what were you going to mention?
What I was going to mention is when we say friends, we mean the people who you would spend the most time with, the people who, if you want to do something, you would reach out to, not people that you just talk to or you're friendly with. We're talking about people that you spend time with. Because Jamti asked, what do you mean by friends? Because as a Muslim, and this is what we mean by, is it necessary to cut off friends? People who you spend the most time with that keep pressuring you to do bad, that's who we're saying you should cut off. And we're not saying cut them off like exile them, talk bad about them. No. What we mean is distance yourself from them. So rather than doing everything with them like you would have done before, keep it professional and maintain a distance with that person so that you aren't being led astray. That's what we mean. You don't have to be horrible to them. You don't have to backbite about them. Stay polite, but keep your friendship or your relationship within reason. Don't be as close to them as you used to before. And Shamal Awari said, you have Allah with you and his angels. That's the best company. Nobody is alone. And that's true. Ultimately, there may be times that you feel isolated, but Allah does say, if my servant calls upon me, I will answer. I am always there. So we aren't actually ever alone, because Allah is always seeing and always watching and always ready to listen. Because, and I do understand that majority of us live in Western countries, so majority of the people who we interact with on a daily aren't going to be Muslim. We can still be polite to those people. We can still have acquaintances with those people. But when it comes to keeping friends and keeping company, we should try and avoid keeping company with those people, because ultimately those people won't have the same value as us or the same beliefs as us. And that's when it gets tricky, because you'll start to accept things because you think that they're your friends, things that you wouldn't have normally accepted before. And that's what we're saying. So we're not saying ignore them, exile them, like talk bad about them, like diminish them in your sight. No, we're just saying have a relationship within reason. Like you can have relationship with like measures, like, do you know what I mean? Like, if that makes sense.
And also just one thing that I wanted to add, sorry, is that like we're not saying that like you can also get Muslims that may have been like led astray and not necessarily do things that would be accepted by Allah. So like even like I wouldn't see anything wrong with having non-Muslims friends, but I guess it all just kind of comes down to like your own judgment and you deciding who you want to keep around. And if it just so happens that the Muslim friends that you're surrounding with unfortunately like might not be a Muslim who does the thing that they should and does things that they shouldn't, then that's up to you as well also to kind of distance yourself from them so that you don't end up doing the things that they do and they don't make you believe that you're allowed to do them. Like subhanallah, I know a couple of like Muslims personally that have like had drinks before and stuff like that. So although we're not saying that your Muslim friends are perfect and you can't get any kind of Muslims that have been like misguided, it's just kind of important to use your own judgment and decide who you want to keep around to ensure that you're still doing what you think is right and you're kind of standing your own ground. And if it just so happens that even like non-Muslim friends, they could like never ask you to do any of the things that they do just because they know exactly what you stand for. So they wouldn't even ask you to like have a cigarette because they know exactly what the answer would be. If that makes sense. I just wanted to add that in there.
Yeah, I was going to mention exactly what you just said there. I was going to say that just because someone has a Muslim name, just because they're wearing hijab, just because, you know, these things, maybe if it's a man, maybe he's got a beard, just because of that doesn't mean that they're also a good influence. You have to actually understand like who you're surrounding yourself with in terms of their behavior, like what kind of behavior do they have? Are they Muslim in character, or is the Islam just represented in their name? And if Islam is only in their name and they're not Muslim in character, then again, that's someone, if they're constantly pressuring you to do something which goes against Islam, then that's something that you should avoid. And also to mention on top of that, I've had non-Muslim friends who would remind me to go and pray, for example. So these are people who I would consider very close friends of mine, and they would remind me to go and pray. Even though they themselves don't pray and they don't believe in Islam, they're not Muslim at all, they would remind me to pray. So again, it's just these kinds of people are the kind of people that we want to surround ourselves with. It's not whether they're Muslim or not, it's more about what kind of character they have. Ikram, I think you were going to mention something.
Yeah, I did. Princess Rashida commented that the more you grow as a Muslimah and learn who you are, the more you can handle dealing with people with other beliefs. You will still have to make sure you keep reflecting on your own actions and intentions. And I think that's very, very true. Like regardless of your friends, regardless of whether they're Muslim or non-Muslim, you still have to look at yourself and reflect on your actions and your intention when you're with them and when you're not with them, and that will help shape your behavior towards these people, whether they're Muslim or not. And I think with having like Muslim friends or acquaintances who aren't exactly telling you to do the right thing, they don't have to be the one to tell you. You can be the one to tell them. I think in today's society, a lot of people fear, like a lot of people's remark is, oh, don't judge, you can't judge them. And you can tell people or advise people without judging them. You can just be like, hey, from a friend to a friend, like I have noticed that this, and this, and I have read somewhere, I have learned that this and this and this isn't allowed. I just wanted to let you know in case, do you know what I mean? Like, there's a way to advise people without creating a hostile environment or without relinquishing the relationship. That's all I wanted to say.
Yeah, definitely. Sometimes it is best to actually give advice, and I think that's the best kind of friend, really. If your friend is telling you, you shouldn't do this because, Allah is displeased with it, and, they're explaining it to you properly in a nice, respectful way as well, that's the kind of person I want to keep around, because I'd rather have someone reminding me of Allah than someone who is not reminding me of Allah and is not telling me not to do things that I do which are wrong. Do you get what I mean? So yeah, definitely something that we should keep in mind. Yeah, so one more thing, other than peer pressure, why is it important to keep good company? And this is where we're going to finish it off. Ikram?
Well, I think all of us sisters have listed an amount of hadith and Quranic ayah of why it's good to keep good company. But for me, it's very important to keep good company because those are the people who form your way of thought and your identity. You keep company with people who think like you, with people who you can bond with over the same ideas and thoughts, etc. So I think it's very important to keep good company to make sure that your beliefs and your intentions aren't really shifted and don't really change, because when you have good company or people who think like you, it just strengthens your resolve in what you believe in. And yeah, I think that's all I really want to say. I will just maybe mention again that like Allah does say in the Quran again, that keep yourself with those who pray and seek his forgiveness and ask for his countenance. And I think that's very important because Allah is warning us that it's better to keep good company. It's better for us and it's better for them and it's better for us in the long term. And I think that's the most important thing. Yeah.
And Ruqayyah, do you have anything to add to that?
I do think we've covered a lot of that when we talk about peer pressure, but like just to kind of re-emphasize like the whole you are who you hang around with thing. Like you don't want to misrepresent yourself when you're like seen in public or when it comes to like having anyone over to your house and stuff. You don't want to have anyone around that not necessarily believe as in religiously, but kind of their kind of morals and stuff like that and their values. You want them to respect yours as well. And the kind of the people you hang around with can like be like a support system for you, people that you're comfortable around and can kind of be there for you should you go through like a difficult time, or even if it's just like one of those days, so like for example, like back when I was in sixth form, I literally just one of those days where like I don't want to revise, I can't be bothered, but like having the people around you who do want to do well and want you to do well, you kind of get like encouragement and motivation to also do well, if that makes sense. So like just something as simple as that, as well, just someone who prevents you from doing anything that you shouldn't be doing, like from any kind of physical harm or mental harm, anything like that. But yeah, I think we covered a lot of it when talking about peer pressure.
Yeah, we certainly did. We talked a lot about why it's good to keep good company. And as I mentioned before, the hadith about the blacksmith and the musk seller, it is important because of that, because bad influence rubs off on you, good influence rubs off on you. So it's always good to just make sure that we are sticking to people who are having a good influence on us. And as Shireen says, we need to have confidence on our choices and in our identity, and that's definitely something I agree with. Once you're confident in yourself and your choice and your identity as a Muslim, then you should be able to say no to things when people are pressuring you into doing something you don't want to do. So yeah, that's where we'll end today's show, inshallah. Jazakallah khair for all of the comments and everyone listening. Please like, share, comment, subscribe, all of that kind of stuff. And inshallah we'll see you again next week on Saturday. Jazakallah khair for all of your du'as. Ameen. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.